those people who know my channel will know that I don't really care what people say. I'm interested in whether or not they can raise the standard of the debate, which means I'm interested in people who will take a different view to me. I'm interested in people who will um, respond entertainingly and creatively and intelligently to an issue. And I always find Mahyar Tousi rises to that bait, and it's always a pleasure listening to him, even though I don't always agree with what he says. And I really, I, I thought his piece on Kemi Badenough and her interview with Jane Secker on Sky was very interesting. I also think a lot of points that he raised from it were entirely valid, but I think he missed one of the key points. And I think Kemi Badenough was playing the class politics ticket rather inappropriately. And I'll go on and explain what that is. So I think it's quite right. I love the fact that Mahyar pulled Jane Secker up for claiming that she was from the poor north when in fact she'd been to a private school and various other bits and pieces. And Mahyar said, he knows what poverty is. Yes, he does. And I think Jane Secker cannot play that card. Kemi Badenoch, uh, Kemi Badenoch was trying to suggest that the net zero thing and the car stuff and the new ideas about climate change and delaying the net zero goal was an attempt to help poorer people, and and Kemi Badenoch pointed out that there are poorer people in the countryside, and this policy is there to help them. No, the debate squared off onto that, and in fact, it missed the real key. The real key is it's outrageous of this present government to claim that it's concerned about poor people in the country and about their mobility. Outrageous. Because it's under this government that a quarter of the bus routes in the country have been lost, that quite a large number of rail routes have been lost. And if you are dependent on public transport, it's rapidly becoming impossible to go anywhere if you live in the country and if you don't drive. I don't drive. And great to hear stuff about heating pump conversions has been put off until later. Great. But it's outrageous. It's outrageous of Kemi Badenoch to claim that she stands for the country when a quarter of the bus routes have been lost. So post-COVID, there was £1.1 billion given to public transport, given to bus transport, and most of that went to cities, went to urban areas. Very little went to the rural areas. The county council's network said that two-thirds of that funding went to cities. I think it's actually more than that, despite a recognised decline in the in bus transport across the countryside. So 37 of the largest county council and rural authorities recorded almost 10% of the fund. That's £363 million. And there's more than half of the country's population live in those 37 largest county and rural authorities. While the cities, in contrast, got £739 million. The more routes have been dropped in the country than in the cities. Services have been reduced to the point where buses are rendered useless. I remember going to teach in a school in in the middle of Sussex and thinking, oh, I can easily get to the local town from here. No, I couldn't. There was really only one bus away per day, and that went at the wrong time for me to actually use it. Uh, you couldn't leave and come back in the same day, and the same thing is true of trains. It's very difficult now unless you live very close to London to get into London and then get back out after, for example, um, attending a meeting or going to the theatre. You can't go to the theatre in London unless you live in London or very close to London, unless you are going to spend the night there. It's absurd. Whereas in the past, not so long ago, when I was a student, very easy. In fact, even in the 1990s, very easy to get from London out to Birmingham, out to Oxford, out to Cambridge, and so on. Much harder to do that now. Much harder, and certainly impossible to get in and out to where I currently live. So operators are dropping more routes. Operators are reducing services to the point where the buses are rendered useless, where the trains are rendered useless. Hence, there's a 44% drop in passengers since 2010. It's not their choice. The routes don't exist. And what's the point in taking this one casual bus that happens to go from Spalding to Boston once a day or whatever? The number of people travelling by bus since 2010 has dropped from 780 million to 435 million. It's outrageous. Buses are a lifeline for particularly the elderly and the disabled. And there is now a patchy, dilatory, chaotic service that we can't rely on. A bus may now just be a pleasure. It's not something that we can practically organise our life around, because it simply doesn't go to and from where you want it to go to. And if you want to travel across the country, you can't do it. You have to go into London and then out of London. It's expensive, it's time wasting, and it's pointless. Older, disadvantaged people, disabled people, people who have a very limited income, are hit unreasonably by this policy. And we're told, less bus passes are being used now than 10 years ago. Well, that's absolutely true. You can't use a bus pass if you don't have a bus on which to travel, can you? Kemi Badenough is utterly patronising about this issue, and Jane Secker is so utterly unprepared that she surrenders immediately. There you see two people having a conversation without all the facts. And Mahyar Tousi is absolutely right to mock Jane Secker for being unprepared. But he would be wrong, I think, and I know he doesn't always approve of Kemi Badenough, and I think now is a time for him not to approve of Kemi Badenoch. He'd be wrong to see Kemi Badenoch as winning this argument. No, Kemi Badenoch is equally wrong. It's not a matter of one person wins, one person fails. In this particular interview, both of the individuals failed appallingly. And I think when we have national broadcasters, when we have MSN broadcasters, I think they should be prepared, and they should be ready to interview ministers, and they should give ministers a fair crack of the whip, and ask them the right sort of questions and probe, rather than just pander or look inadequate. It's what's the point of having an interviewer if they don't do an interview? I would like to see people like Mahyar Tousi on mainstream media, frankly. Mahyar Tousi, Andrew Gold, these people should be up there on mainstream media replacing these twits who simply are unprepared, and they've got their voice pieces in their ear. Why is nobody in the gallery prompting them? Because they're unprepared as well. This is such a lame media that we have got, when people around the country are utterly brought to a standstill by the policies that have been pursued by our government for the last 10 years or so. And there's no comeback, because there's nobody asking the right questions. So if your take-home pay is very small, if you don't have any take-home pay, if you live in the country, if you are disabled, if you are older, you cannot rely on public transport, because it does not exist. And somebody like Kemi Badenough, pontificating from her position of authority and her position in the city, in Westminster, who occasionally goes to her constituency and claims then to know about the problems in rural life. She knows nothing. Nothing. Rural life has been decimated. That means basically 1 in 10 people can have been taken out, by the way. Decimated is not completely destroyed, but it has been seriously damaged by this government and previous governments in the last 20 years. We have seen rural industries destroyed, and Brexit was cited as something that would restore the fortunes of the country, and it has done nothing. In fact, the fortunes of people working in the farming industry have fallen further since Brexit than they were before Brexit.